The night was cold and the small city never truly slept. Streetlights buzzed, cars rushed past, and somewhere in the middle of all this noise walked a tired man named Ethan Ward. His steps were heavy, his shoulders bent forward, and his eyes carried the weight of endless sleepless nights. Ethan was not a soldier, not a hero, not a famous man. He was just a single father, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table for his daughter. Every morning he worked at the factory, fixing broken machines for long hours. Every evening he drove across the city, delivering packages until his hands shook with exhaustion. And when he finally returned home, his little girl, Lila, was often already asleep. Ethan whispered to himself, "Just one more week. Just one more paycheck," as if those words could keep him moving. But Ethan was not alone. High above Earth, beyond the sky humans could see, a ship floated silently in orbit. Inside that ship stood a figure unlike anything Earth had ever known. Zira, the CEO of one of the most powerful alien corporations in the galaxy, stood by a giant screen. Her tall frame glowed with silver light, her eyes sharp and inhuman yet filled with something rare. Curiosity. Her people were advanced beyond measure. They studied planets, controlled trade routes between stars, and even shaped the rise and fall of civilizations. To them, Earth was nothing but a small young world, too primitive to matter. Yet for reasons she could not explain, Zara had chosen to study one man. Not a president, not a scientist, not a warrior, but Ethan Ward, a human father who worked himself to the edge of collapse. Zara whispered to herself, "Why does he continue? Why does he not break?" She could watch hundreds of humans at once, but Ethan was different. For months she had followed his struggle through hidden drones and silent surveillance. Tonight, however, something pulled stronger inside her. She did not want to just observe from space. She wanted to see him with her own eyes. Moments later, her ship shimmered, bending light around it until it became invisible to human eyes. A smaller craft detached and fell silently through the clouds, landing in the shadows outside the city. From it stepped Zira, cloaked in a disguise that made her look human. She pulled a hood over her head and began to follow Ethan. Ethan's tired feet dragged along the sidewalk as he carried 2 heavy bags of deliveries. His back ached, but he kept moving. He thought about Lila waiting at home. She had asked him that morning, "Daddy, can you read me a story tonight?" Ethan had forced a smile. "I'll try, sweet pea." But deep inside he knew he would be too late again. Zira watched from the corner of the street. She saw his face lined with worry. She saw the way he pushed himself, not for glory, not for wealth, but for a child who depended on him. And something stirred inside her, something she had not felt in centuries. Admiration. Her world, her company, her empire, all of it was built on profit, logic, and cold calculation. Sacrifice was seen as weakness. Love was seen as distraction. Yet here was a fragile human who lived every second for another being. And he refused to give up. "Strange creature," Zara murmured, her alien voice hidden under the human disguise. She followed Ethan through the rain, past empty bus stops and flickering lamps. She watched him deliver boxes, his hands trembling, his breath turning white in the night air. Still he carried on. Hours later, Ethan returned to his small apartment. The lights inside were dim, and the sound of a child's laughter echoed faintly. When he opened the door, Lila ran into his arms, holding up a drawing she made with broken crayons. "It's us, Daddy. You and me, and the stars," she said proudly. Ethan's tired eyes softened. He hugged her close, trying not to let her see the pain in his body. From the shadows of a nearby rooftop, Zira watched. She saw the girl smile, the father's tired embrace, and for the first time in centuries her chest ached with something she had forgotten long ago. But her thoughts were cut short. Across the street, hidden in the darkness, another presence stirred. A ripple of movement too quick for human eyes crawled along the building's edge. Zira's gaze sharpened. She recognized it instantly. It was not one of her people. Something else was watching Ethan. Her mind raced. Why would anyone target this ordinary man? Why would another alien species follow him? Was he more important than she had realized? Zara stepped back into the shadows, her disguise flickering for a brief moment. Her eyes glowed faintly, watching the strange presence vanish into the night. The answer was clear. Ethan Ward was no longer just a subject of study. He was a target, and for the first time the powerful alien CEO felt something unexpected. Fear for him. As Ethan tucked Lila into bed, whispering promises of better days, Sierra made a silent vow of her own. She would not allow harm to come to this human. Not while she was watching, but deep inside she wondered, why him? Why this man? The stars outside shone cold and distant, but for Sierra, the world of one single father suddenly burned brighter than entire galaxies. And somewhere in the dark, the other watchers moved closer. Morning light crept into the small apartment. The sound of traffic outside mixed with the smell of old coffee in the air. Ethan Ward rose slowly from the couch, his back stiff, his eyes half shut from lack of sleep. He had fallen asleep with his work boots still on. A soft voice broke the silence. "Daddy, you forgot your blanket again." Lila stood by him, her hair messy, holding a little blanket in her small hands. She draped it over him like a nurse caring for a patient. Ethan smiled weakly and pulled her close. "I'm fine, sweet pea," he whispered. But the truth was heavy. His body was running on empty, and yet he had no choice. Bills were stacked high, and food was never enough. By the time Lila sat at the table with her bowl of cereal, Ethan was already pulling on his jacket, getting ready for the factory. "I'll be back before you know it," he promised. Lila looked at him with big eyes. "Can we play after dinner?" Ethan hesitated. His hands froze for a second on his jacket zipper. Finally, he forced another smile. "I'll try." He kissed her forehead and walked out, his heart breaking because he knew he would not make it. Across the street, hidden in plain sight, Sierra observed through her disguise. She blended perfectly with the human crowd, looking like any ordinary woman rushing to work. But her eyes, sharp and inhuman beneath the mask, never left Ethan. She followed him silently to the factory. The building was massive, machines roaring inside like metal beasts. Ethan clocked in and began his shift. Hours passed. He lifted heavy parts, repaired broken belts, wiped sweat from his brow, and ignored the sharp pain in his back. Sarah watched every detail. Her advanced sensors could read his pulse, his oxygen level, even the tremor in his hands. By all logic, this man should have collapsed long ago, yet he kept going. She whispered to herself, humans. So fragile, and yet they endure. During a short break, Ethan sat alone with a cheap sandwich. His coworkers laughed together, talking about weekend plans. But Ethan simply stared at a picture on his phone. Lila smiling with missing teeth, holding a paper star she had cut out. That single image gave him the strength to rise again and return to the machines. As the sun sank and the factory closed, Ethan's day did not end. He rushed to his second job. By nightfall, he was driving across the city in an old delivery van, carrying packages to doorsteps. His eyes were heavy, his stomach empty, but his determination unshaken. Sierra followed in the shadows, sometimes walking, sometimes appearing suddenly in another street, thanks to her alien cloak. She studied the way humans lived, the noise of their streets, the stress of their lives. Yet her focus always returned to Ethan. Hours passed, and Ethan delivered the last box at midnight. His hands were shaking as he signed off the shift. "Another day done," he muttered. But his body was screaming for rest. He didn't notice the shadow across the street. A tall figure, too still, too silent, watching him from behind a flickering light. Sarah noticed, her eyes narrowed. It was one of the Koran, the rival alien species. They were hunters, scavengers of lives, masters of moving unseen. The fact that one followed Ethan meant only one thing. He was marked. Why? He was just a father, not a leader or a scientist. Why would the Koran waste resources on him? Zira's instincts sharpened. She moved closer, her disguise hiding her presence. She tracked the Koran, making sure they stayed in the shadows, never reaching Ethan. Ethan, unaware of the silent war happening around him, drove home through the dark streets. His mind was on Lila. She's probably asleep already. He sighed, guilt twisting in his chest. When Ethan entered the apartment, Lila was waiting on the couch, her eyes fighting to stay open. She held the same star-shaped paper in her hand. "You're late again," she said softly. Ethan knelt down, guilt burning inside him. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. But look, I'm here now." He picked her up and carried her to bed. She curled against him. "Promise me one day, you won't be so tired." His throat tightened. "I promise," he whispered, though he knew it was a promise he could not keep. From the rooftop, Zira watched. Her alien heart, hardened by years of power and profit, felt something strange. This man had nothing, no wealth, no soldiers, no influence. Yet he gave everything for one small child, and now others wanted to take it from him. She could not look away. Hours later, when the city was quiet, Ethan finally fell asleep at his daughter's bedside. His hand rested near hers, protective even in dreams. Zara remained outside, her gaze fixed on the apartment window. For the first time in her long life, the great alien CEO questioned herself. Why was she still here? Why was she following this one human? The stars above whispered no answers. Only the silent shadow of the Koran, still moving closer, promised danger. Zara clenched her fist under the cloak of night. She told herself she was only studying. She told herself this was just observation, but deep inside she knew the truth. She had begun to care. The city looked peaceful at night, but peace was an illusion. The shadows were alive. They stretched across rooftops, slithered along alleys, and moved with silent hunger. Ethan Ward, the single father who worked until his bones ached, walked through those shadows every day without knowing. To him, danger was paying bills late or Lila catching a cold. But the real danger was far greater, and it had been following him for weeks. The rival species, the Koran, had marked him. They were not conquerors like other aliens. They did not build cities or lead armies. The Koran were predators. They studied, waited, and then took what they wanted. And for reasons unknown, they wanted Ethan Ward. High above, in the still air of the night, Zara stood on a rooftop. The alien CEO, still wearing her human disguise, scanned the streets below. Her eyes, even behind the false mask, could see what no human could. She spotted them, the faint shimmer of Koran cloaks moving along the streetlights, watching Ethan as he left the delivery van. Ethan carried nothing but his tired body and the weight of another endless day. He had no weapon, no shield, just a worn jacket, an old phone, and a father's stubborn will. He walked past the watchers without a clue, humming softly to keep himself awake. Zara's hands tightened. If the Koran struck now, Ethan would not survive. Inside the shadows, one Koran whispered in their strange tongue. The subject shows endurance. He resists collapse. He is ready. Another voice answered, then we take him. The child will follow. The words chilled Zara's heart. Her disguise flickered for a moment, revealing the silver glow beneath. She forced it back. No, she whispered. Ethan reached the small grocery shop near his apartment. He pushed the door open, buying cheap bread and milk for Lila's breakfast. As he stood in line, his eyes grew heavy. He rubbed his face, blaming the strange unease in his chest on exhaustion, but the unease was real. Somewhere deep inside, Ethan's human instinct screamed that something was wrong. His eyes darted to the window, catching a reflection, someone standing too still outside. But when he turned, the space was empty. Just tired, he muttered. Just tired. He paid, left the shop, and walked home. From the rooftops, Zara moved. Her cloak rippled around her as she leapt across buildings, always keeping Ethan in sight. Every sound of the night sharpened in her ears. The hum of power lines, the creak of fire escapes, the quiet click of Koran weapons being readied. They were closing in. Her orders as CEO were clear. Stay neutral. Observe record and never interfere. But orders felt meaningless now. This was no longer a subject of study. This was a man who carried the weight of his world for a child who depended on him, and he was about to be hunted. The attack came without warning. A shimmer tore from the alley ahead of Ethan. A figure, tall and skeletal, stepped into the light. Its skin was dark as smoke, its eyes glowing faint green. Another figure appeared behind him, and then another. The Koran had surrounded him. Ethan froze, confusion burning through his exhaustion. What the hell? One Koran reached out, claws gleaming. Ethan stumbled back, dropping the bag of bread and milk. His heart pounded. For a second he thought this was a nightmare from too many sleepless nights. But the nightmare was real. Zara struck before they could touch him. Her cloak flared as she dropped from the rooftop, landing between Ethan and the Koran. Her disguise flickered, her tall frame glowing faint silver under the streetlight. With a single motion she activated a hidden weapon, a blade of pure light extending from her wrist. The Koran hissed in unison. Zara, the Watcher. Ethan's eyes widened. His brain tried to understand, but the image made no sense. A woman he had seen in passing, a stranger who always seemed nearby, now stood like a warrior from another world. Run, Zara said sharply without turning to him. Take your child and run. Ethan staggered back. What are you? Later, she snapped. The Koran lunged. The fight was silent but brutal. Blades clashed in sparks of green and silver. Zara moved like water, fast and precise, forcing two Koran back. But the third circled, always aiming for Ethan. Ethan's breath caught. His body screamed at him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. He couldn't leave. What if they followed him home? What if Lila was in danger? He grabbed the dropped milk bottle and hurled it at the Koran closest to him. It shattered uselessly, but the sudden move distracted the creature long enough for Zara's blade to slice across its arm. The Koran shrieked and vanished into the shadows. The street went still. Two Koran retreated, their forms melting back into the night. One injured, one watchful. They did not chase. Zara stood in the center, breathing hard, her disguise struggling to hold. Her silver glow flickered bright, then dimmed. Ethan stared at her, his hand shaking. You saved me. Zara turned, her alien eyes locking onto his. They will come again. Who are they? Why me? Ethan demanded, voice breaking. Zara hesitated. For the first time, the powerful CEO had no answer. I don't know, she admitted quietly. And that was the most terrifying truth of all. Later that night, as Ethan finally made it home, he locked every window and door. Lila slept soundly, unaware of the silent war outside. Ethan sat in the dark, shaking, unable to forget the glow of Zara's blade or the hiss of those creatures. Meanwhile, from the rooftop across the street, Zara watched again. Her eyes never left his window. She had interfered once, and now there was no turning back. The shadows had moved, and the game had changed. Ethan Ward was no longer invisible, and the Koran would not stop. The night after the attack felt heavier than usual. The city streets buzzed as always, cars rushing by, neon lights flickering. But for Ethan Ward, every shadow now looked alive. Every corner felt like danger waiting. He tried to hide it from Lila. At breakfast, he smiled and poured her milk, but his hands shook slightly. The girl noticed but said nothing. She was used to her father's tired face, yet this time his eyes carried something new. Fear. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Why didn't you sleep?" Ethan forced a smile. "Just too much coffee." But the truth was locked inside his chest. He could still hear the hiss of those creatures. He could still see the silver light of the strange woman, Zara. Whoever she was, she had saved him. Without her, he would not be alive this morning. While Ethan pushed through another factory shift far above the city, Zara studied the battle again through her ship's recordings. The Koran had revealed themselves sooner than she expected, and their target was clear: Ethan Ward. Why him? She whispered to herself. What value lies in this one human? Her mind turned, full of corporate strategy and galactic politics. The Koran never moved without reason. They harvested strength, endurance, and rare instincts. Could it be that Ethan's endless struggle, his will to endure, was what they sought to take? She clenched her hand. They will try again. Zara had spent her life as an observer, a leader who pulled strings from the safety of her throne. But now she had acted, she had fought. And because she had acted once, she knew she could not stop. She had made Ethan her responsibility. That evening, Ethan left the factory late. His second job awaited him, and the sky above was already dark. Rain tapped against the pavement as he walked, collar raised against the chill. He told himself the fight in the street had been a dream. Exhaustion could make a man see things. Maybe he was losing his mind, but deep inside he knew it was no dream. Halfway to the delivery hub, his legs suddenly buckled. A heavy beam from a construction site above had loosened. It dropped without warning, crashing down toward him. For a single heartbeat, Ethan froze. He thought, this is the end. Then the beam stopped, suspended inches above him, glowing faint silver. Ethan stumbled back, gasping. The beam lifted itself aside, smashing harmlessly to the ground. And there she was again. The woman, the alien Zara. She stood on the other side of the street, her hand glowing faintly before fading back into her human disguise. Ethan stared. You... again. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed something sharp. You must be more careful. Ethan's voice shook. Careful? A steel beam almost killed me. It was not an accident, Zara replied quietly. They want you removed. Ethan's mind spun. His heart raced. Why me? I'm nobody. Just a father trying to survive. Why do they care? Zara did not answer. She could not. Because she still didn't know. Instead, she said, "Your strength, it is not invisible, and strength attracts hunters." Ethan almost laughed, bitter and tired. Strength? You think I'm strong? Look at me. I can barely keep food on the table. But Zara only tilted her head, her alien gaze piercing through the disguise. And yet you endure. That is why you are more dangerous than you realize. Her words unsettled him. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but exhaustion swallowed his anger. All he wanted was to see Lila safe. He turned to walk away. Whoever you are, just stay away from my daughter. That night, Ethan returned home late. Lila had fallen asleep waiting on the couch again, her crayon drawings scattered across the table. One picture showed her and Ethan holding hands standing under a sky full of stars. Ethan picked it up, his throat tight. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered to her sleeping form. "I swear it." He didn't know that outside, in the cold rain, Zara was already keeping that promise for him. From the shadows of the street, she scanned the buildings. A faint ripple moved on the rooftop across from Ethan's apartment. Another Corin scout. Silent, waiting. Zara's cloak shimmered as she moved. She crept up the wall like liquid silver, silent as the rain. The Corin didn't sense her until it was too late. Her blade of light snapped to life, piercing through the dark. The scout hissed, striking back, but Zara was faster. With a twist of her wrist, the Corin collapsed, its body dissolving into ash as its cloak failed. The street below never noticed. Humans passed by, unaware that a silent war had just flared above them. When she returned to her hidden spot, Zara looked once more into Ethan's apartment. He was asleep in a chair beside Lila, his head tilted, his hand resting protectively near hers. Zara felt something inside her chest, something unfamiliar and uncomfortable. She had lived through centuries, commanded fleets, ruled with profit and logic, but never had she seen a being so fragile, so limited, and yet so willing to burn himself down just to keep another safe. In the silence of the night, she whispered, "What are you, human?" By dawn, Ethan woke with stiff limbs. He stretched, made coffee, and prepared for another day. To him, life was simple. Work, protect, survive. But far above, in the invisible ship, Zara watched with a new understanding. Ethan Ward was no longer just a subject. He was a lesson, a mirror of something her people had forgotten, and she knew this truth. The Corin would never stop hunting him, so she would never stop protecting him, even if it meant breaking every law of her empire. The days that followed felt like a storm slowly building around Ethan Ward. He worked his shifts, he delivered his packages, he smiled for his daughter, but nothing was normal anymore. He saw shadows moving where no one stood. He heard whispers in the night. And always, somewhere in the corner of his vision, that strange woman appeared. Zara. At first, he had thought she was an angel or a hallucination from lack of sleep. But he had seen her fight. He had seen her blade of light cut through things no human could face, and deep in his chest he carried a question that grew heavier each day. What is she? And why is she protecting me? One evening, Ethan finished a long shift and walked home under a sky full of clouds. The city lights flickered, making the streets feel like a broken dream. He felt it again, the presence. He spun suddenly, his fists clenched. She was there, standing at the edge of the street, her hood covering most of her face. "That's enough," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Who are you? Why are you following me?" Zara stood silent for a moment, her eyes glowing faintly even under the disguise. Finally, she stepped closer. "You are being hunted," she said quietly. "I am keeping you alive." Ethan shook his head. "That's not an answer. I deserve to know. What do they want with me? Why are you here?" His voice cracked louder than he intended. Weeks of exhaustion, fear, and confusion spilled out at once. Zara's face remained calm, but her eyes softened. She could feel his desperation, his anger, his terror. For a long moment she stayed silent, debating with herself. Finally, she whispered, "I am not from this world." Ethan froze. His chest tightened. The words sounded insane, but after what he had seen, he couldn't deny them. "What do you mean? Not from this world?" Zara lifted her hand. The air shimmered around it as her disguise melted away for the first time. Silver light wrapped around her tall frame, her skin glowing faintly like liquid metal. her eyes deep and alien, reflecting galaxies. Ethan stumbled back, shock ripping through him. His mind screamed monster, but his heart remembered the night she saved him. "My name is Zara," she said. "I lead a company far beyond your sky. We observe, we trade, we shape the rise of worlds. I came here to study. But when I saw you..." I stayed. Ethan's mouth went dry. His thoughts raced like fire. He wanted to run, to scream, but his legs stayed rooted. "You're an alien." "Yes. And those things that attacked me? The Koran hunters, they see value in you." Ethan shook his head, furious. "Value? I'm not valuable. I'm just a man who can't even give his daughter a proper life." His voice cracked with guilt. "Why me?" Zara stepped closer, her silver eyes glowing. "Because you endure what should break you. They want that strength. They want to take it, twist it, and use it." Ethan clenched his fists, anger mixing with fear. "Then stop them, end this. Leave me and Lila alone." Zara felt something strange inside her chest. For centuries, she had commanded thousands with a single word. Empires bowed to her, fleets moved at her command. But standing here before this fragile man, she felt powerless. "I can protect you," she said softly. "I don't need protection. I need peace," Ethan replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I don't want my little girl caught in this madness." He turned to walk away, but her voice stopped him. "If you walk away, they will find you. If you stay blind, they will take her too." Ethan froze. Slowly, he looked back. His heart sank. "Lila?" Zara's silence was the answer. That night, Ethan sat by his daughter's bed as she slept. He held her tiny hand in his rough, calloused fingers. Fear gnawed at him like a beast. He had always believed the world's dangers were simple. Bills, sickness, the cruelty of poverty. But now he knew monsters existed beyond the sky, and they wanted him. He whispered to the sleeping child, "I'll keep you safe no matter what it costs." Unseen, Zara stood outside, watching. She had not planned to reveal herself so soon, but the truth could no longer stay buried. Ethan had to know. Yet as she looked through the window, she wondered, would he ever trust her? Or would he see her as just another monster in the night? The answer came the next morning. Ethan confronted her outside the apartment as the sun rose. He looked tired, but his voice was steady. "If you're telling the truth," he said, "then help me fight them. Don't just watch from the shadows. Stand with me." For Lila, Zara's alien heart stirred. No human had ever spoken to her like this, not with fear but with demand. Not begging for mercy but asking for alliance. She nodded slowly. "Then you must be ready for what comes next." But before she could explain, a sound cut through the street. Sharp, unnatural, like air being torn apart. Ethan turned. His eyes widened. The Koran were here. 3 of them. This time they didn't hide. Zara's disguise fell away completely as her silver blade lit up once more. Ethan's blood went cold, but he stepped in front of his daughter's window, his fists clenched. For the first time, father and alien stood side by side. The truth had cracked open. There was no going back. The morning sun was weak, its light hidden behind heavy clouds. The street outside Ethan Ward's apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No voices, no footsteps, only the faint hum of power lines. It was the kind of silence that made the skin crawl. Ethan stood near the window, his fists clenched, his heart hammered in his chest, not from exhaustion this time, but from fear. He knew they were coming. The Koran, the hunters who wanted him. Behind him, little Lila played with her paper stars, unaware of the storm about to break. Beside the door stood Zara, her tall frame glowing faint silver under the disguise that could no longer hide her true nature. Her alien eyes scanned the street with precision. She could feel them drawing closer. "They are here," she said softly. Ethan swallowed hard. "What do they want with me?" Zara's blade of light unfolded from her wrist with a hiss. "To take what you carry. Your will, your endurance, and through you, your daughter." Ethan's blood ran cold. He stepped protectively in front of Lila. "Over my dead body." Zara glanced at him. "That is exactly their plan." The attack came like a storm. 3 Koran tore out of the shadows, their bodies thin and sharp like blades of living smoke. Their eyes glowed green, their movements too fast for human sight. They struck from 3 sides at once, hissing in their strange tongue. Zara's blade ignited the air, meeting the first attacker with a crack of energy. Sparks lit up the street. Another Koran lunged at Ethan. For a moment, Ethan froze. He had no weapon, no shield, nothing but his body. But instinct roared louder than fear. He grabbed a broken pipe from the corner of the room and swung it with all his strength. The Koran hissed, knocked off balance for a second. Ethan's arms shook from the force, but he planted his feet in front of Lila. "You're not taking her," he shouted. The room erupted into chaos. Zara fought like lightning, her blade cutting through shadows, each strike filled with precision. But the Koran were fast, circling her, trying to pull her away from Ethan. Ethan fought his own battle. Every swing of the pipe was clumsy compared to their speed, but his determination made them hesitate. They had expected fear. They had expected weakness. Instead, they found a father who would die before letting them touch his child. One Koran hissed, its claws flashing toward Ethan's chest. Ethan lifted his arms, ready to take the blow, but Zira was there, her blade slicing across the creature before it could strike. Ethan gasped. "You saved me again." Her silver eyes burned. "You are not allowed to fall." Not yet, but the Koran were not retreating. They wanted Ethan too badly. The leader hissed, its voice like knives scraping glass. "The human resists. The human endures. The human will be ours." Zara lunged forward, clashing with the leader. Their blades lit the room, silver against sickly green. She pushed with all her strength, but the Koran pressed back with inhuman fury. Behind her, Ethan grabbed Lila and pulled her close. She was crying now, her tiny voice breaking through the chaos. "Daddy, I'm scared." Ethan hugged her tight. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Even as the walls shook, even as alien monsters hissed around them, his words were steady. The leader Koran shoved Zira back with a burst of energy. Her blade flickered, her disguise collapsing completely. She stood in full alien form now, tall, glowing. Her silver body a living weapon. Ethan saw her true self for the first time, and though fear struck him, another thought burned brighter. She's fighting for us. The Koran leader struck again, claws reaching for Ethan. Without thinking, Ethan moved. He stepped in front of his daughter, arms wide, ready to be torn apart if it meant she lived. "No," he roared. For a heartbeat, time froze. The Koran slashed down, and Zira intercepted her blade, piercing through the creature's chest. A scream split the air as the leader dissolved into ash, its body crumbling into nothing. The others shrieked and pulled back, fading into the shadows. The street went still again. Silence filled the room. Ethan's chest heaved. Lila clung to his leg, crying softly. Zira lowered her blade, her glow dimming. She looked at Ethan, her alien eyes unreadable. "You faced them without fear," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head, breathless. "I was terrified." He looked down at his daughter. "But she needed me." "That's enough." Zira tilted her head. In her galaxy, courage was measured in battles won, empires controlled. But here, in this small apartment, courage was a man with nothing but love standing against death itself. Something inside her shifted, but victory came at a cost. Zira's sensors buzzed. More Koran ships had entered the atmosphere. This was not over. Tonight had been only the beginning. She turned to Ethan, her voice sharp. "You cannot stay here. They will return stronger." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is our home." "Your home will burn if you remain," Zara warned. "If you want your daughter safe, you must trust me." Ethan hesitated. His whole life had been about fighting alone, depending on no one. But tonight he had seen the truth. Without Zira, they would already be dead. He looked at her, his voice rough. "Then tell me everything. No more secrets. If I fight with you, I need the truth." Zara met his gaze. Her alien eyes glowed softly. "Then you will have it. But once you know, your world will never be the same." Ethan held Lila close, his tired heart pounding with fear and resolve. He had no idea what the truth was or why aliens wanted him. But he knew one thing. He would never stop fighting for his daughter. And now, for the first time, he would not fight alone. The night sky above Earth was no longer silent. Hidden beyond the clouds, dark ships moved like predators circling prey. The Koran were gathering. In the small apartment below, Ethan Ward held his daughter close, his heart racing as Zara explained the truth. "The Koran will not stop," she said, her silver form glowing faintly in the dim light. "They take what they desire. They feed on strength, on will. You, Ethan, have what they want most, the power to endure. That is rare. That is dangerous. And through you they will break into your kind." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm just a man. A tired man. Why me?" Zara looked at him for a long moment. because even when you have nothing, you still stand. That is what frightens them. That is why they want you. Ethan swallowed hard, his arms around Lila. He thought of every long shift, every night he returned home broken but still smiling for her. To him it was nothing heroic, it was just survival. But now survival had become something greater. The air outside rippled with sound. The Corrin were coming. Zara's voice was firm. We must leave now. I can call my fleet. With my command I can protect you both. But if I break our law to defend a single human, my empire will turn against me. I will lose everything. Ethan stared at her. Then don't leave us. Save yourself. Zara's eyes glowed brighter. I cannot. For centuries she had lived by rules of profit and control. She had traded entire worlds like pieces on a board. But now, standing in a small apartment beside a weary father and his child, she felt something greater than power, something her people had forgotten long ago. She felt humanity. The building shook as a beam of green energy sliced across the street outside. Windows shattered. Lila screamed, clinging to her father. Ethan lifted her into his arms, his voice steady even as the walls cracked. It's okay, baby. Daddy's here. Zara stepped in front of them, her blade igniting with silver fire. Shadows poured through the broken walls. 5 Corrin this time, their claws gleaming, their eyes burning with hunger. The leader hissed, its voice sharp. The human belongs to us. Step aside, Watcher. Zara raised her blade. He belongs to no one. The Corrin surged forward. The battle exploded in light and sound. Zara moved like a storm, her blade carving silver arcs through the air. Sparks flew as green energy clashed against her strikes. She fought with fury she had never known before, not for empire, not for profit, but for 2 fragile lives behind her. Ethan stood in the corner, holding Lila tight. But when one Corrin broke past Zara, racing toward them, he acted. He grabbed a metal rod from the rubble and swung with everything he had. The blow staggered the creature for just a second, enough for Zara to strike it down. She glanced at him briefly. You are reckless, Ethan panted, sweat dripping. I'm a father. The fight raged on. One Corrin pinned Zara against the wall, claws digging into her shoulder. Pain seared through her, but she shoved back, her blade slicing clean. Another creature lunged for Ethan again, its claws inches from Lila. Without thinking, Ethan turned his own body into a shield. Take me, not her, he roared. The claws struck but stopped, caught in a burst of silver energy. Zara had thrown herself between them, her blade slicing the creature in half. She turned sharply, her voice fierce. You will not die for her. You will live for her. Ethan's chest heaved. For a moment their eyes met. Man and alien, both standing on the edge of death, bound by a single truth. Love was stronger than fear. The final Corrin hissed, retreating into the shadows, but before it vanished its voice echoed cold and sharp. This is not the end. Others will come. The human will be ours. Then it was gone. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of broken wires and Lila's soft sobs. Ethan sank to his knees, holding her close. Zara stood tall, her blade fading, her body dimming from exhaustion. The battle was over, for now. Later, when the street was quiet again, Ethan sat outside the ruins of his home. Lila slept in his arms, her face pressed against his chest. He looked at Zara, who stood watching the stars, her silver form shining faintly in the night. You could have left, he said softly. You could have saved yourself. Zara did not turn. Her voice was steady. I made my choice. What choice is that? Ethan asked. She finally looked at him. To stand with you, to protect what even the galaxy has forgotten. Humanity. Ethan stared at her, his throat tight. He was just a man, just a father. But for the first time he realized his fight mattered, not just for Lila, but for something greater. Above them, Corrin ships circled, waiting. Zara knew her empire would question her. She knew she had broken every law of her people. But as she watched Ethan cradle his daughter, she whispered to herself, maybe one human is worth more than an empire. The stars burned cold and distant, but in the ruins of one small street something brighter had been born. An alliance. A spark, a truth, and deep in her alien heart, Zara felt the words she had never dared to say. Perhaps humanity is stronger than we ever believed.